DWI has its own set of sentencing rules and processes and statutes completely separate from all other misdemeanors. It's really, the legislature spent a lot of time legislating on this area, and so DWI sentencing can be quite complicated. But in general, the court is to weigh, take evidence on and decide whether these things exist, and then weigh what are called grossly aggravating factors, aggravating factors, and mitigating factors. And there's lists of things that are those. The most important are the grossly aggravating factors, because those are the things that greatly increase the punishment that you face for a DWI. And those things are, if you have any prior convictions within 7 years, if you have any children in the car under age 18, or any disabled people that can't get out of the car by themselves, or mentally handicapped people who are functionally under 18, those things count. Or if you have an accident and you cause serious injury, or you're driving the car at that time you got the DWI while your license is revoked for a previous DWI or some other alcohol-related offense that they have a long list of. Those are the things that are grossly aggravating factors that really affect the punishment. The aggravating factors, mitigating factors apply if none of those grossly aggravating factors apply. So if it's your first offense, then those things are weighed out to decide how much of certain kinds of things you get. But the real biggies are the grossly aggravating factors.
So in the event this is your second or third offense, what are some of the things that are going to specifically
the punishment levels are divided numerically, and so the least is a level 5. That's for the generic first offense, low amount on the breath test, no accident, just no aggravating factors, a lot of mitigating factors. That's the least. And the worst is an aggravated level 1, and that's a kind of a recent thing the legislature added on, where you really bear some punishment. So the way you get those aggravated level 1, and level 2 punishments, which are the ones that have grossly aggravating factors, those are the higher ones. The 3, 4, and 5 are the first minutes. Not really much complicated about that. But for a level 2, if you have one prior conviction of DWI within 7 years, that's the only grossly aggravating factor you have. Or if you have one of the other grossly aggravating factors for driving and causing some injury, or if you were driving license revoked, one of those will put you at the level 2. And for level 2s, there's a mandatory minimum 7 days in jail. You can get up to a year in prison. That's very rare. I've never had a client at a level 2 get more than the minimum. That's one of the reasons you need a lawyer. It's a pretty broad range of sentencing between the 7 days and 1 year, but that's where you try to go. And there's actually a way to now, under a fairly recent change, to even avoid the jail if you are willing to wear a continuous alcohol monitor for a period of time for 120 days and prove that you are not drinking alcohol. Then there's a way you can avoid having to do jail now for level 2.
That's great to know.
Yeah, for if you have 2 grossly aggravating factors, or if you have only one aggravating factor, grossly aggravating factor, but it is having a child under 18 in the car, then your sentence is what's called a level 1. And for level 1, it carries a mandatory minimum 30 days in jail. And there is a way to reduce that down to 10 days, again, by using the continuous alcohol monitor for 120 days to show that you're not drinking. So that's an option. In all of these cases where there's a grossly aggravating factor involved, you lose your license for various lengths of time, but you cannot get a driving privilege. So you're not allowed to drive at all with any of the grossly aggravated levels of DWI.
Very good to know. It's very helpful. Thank you very much, Alan.
The last one is the aggravated level 1. That's the real killer. That's if you have 3 or more grossly aggravating factors. And in that scenario, you get a sentence of from 1 year in prison to 3 years in prison, and the only way that can be suspended is if you are sentenced to 120 days in the jail. And you will also have to have a continuous alcohol monitor for at least 120 days, and for the length of time you're on probation is most likely what it is. So that's a really, really big hammer for a DWI if you have 3 grossly aggravating factors or more.
So, sure, learn your lesson the first time is the moral of the story, but if you don't,
let's put it on you. And it's interesting, the time limits for the effect on how long your driver's license is revoked are different from the time limits for your prior convictions being grossly aggravating factors. So for example, if you have 1 prior DWI, and they look back 7 years from the date you got convicted of the previous one to the date you got charged for the one you're being sentenced on now. So it's to get the most possible. It's not from when you were charged with the other one to when you're charged with this. It's from when you were convicted of the other one. So you could have been charged 8 years ago, 9 years ago, but it's when you convicted. But for the length of time your license is revoked, if you have a prior conviction of DWI and the offense date for that prior was within 3 years of the date of the offense for the one you're being sentenced on, then the length of time your license is revoked is 4 years. But if it's more than 3 years, then it's only 1 year. I don't know why the legislature did like that. There's no sense. And then for when you have if you have 2 prior convictions of DWI, then if the most recent one was within 5 years, again, date of offense to date of offense, then it doesn't matter how old the third one was, your revocation is what they call permanent. And you could have had one 20 years ago and then had one within the last 5 years, and your revocation will be permanent. Now, permanent doesn't mean completely permanent. There are ways I can get your license back eventually, but it's pretty harsh.
So, more of the story in that case, always get an attorney.
Always get an attorney. Yes, you need. Yeah, this is, like I say, DWIs have their own separate system of sentencing, separate from all other misdemeanors, all other felonies. Its own animal, and you really need somebody that knows what they're doing with DWIs, because they're just unlike the rest of the statutes.
That's really helpful. Thank you again, Alan Brotherton with Knox Law in Godfrey.